Welcome to the On Stage podcast, where we deep dive into the power of music and entertainment. Welcome, everyone, to another On Stage. Today we have tenor and theater performer Jarrad Biron Green. He's a New York-based actor and singer. He attended NYU Steinhardt for musical theater. He's a proud member of Actors Equity, which is high class there. And he has starred in the West Side Story National Tour as Tony. He has performed in numerous regional theater productions, including The Who's Tommy as Tommy. That's interesting. The Toxic Avenger, Toxie Melvin, last 5 years as Jamie. The Hunchback of Notre Dame as Clopin. Damn Yankees Joe Hardy, and Altar Boys Luke. And you're also the lead singer of a power metal band called Quantum Twilight. I tried to search your band and your songs and I couldn't find it. So we'll have to look and discuss that. Can you give us a little bit of a background of how did you get started in musical theater?
Ooh, okay. So my parents, I guess I have to thank my parents for that, for introducing me to what would become my passion in my life. At a very young age, they enrolled me in this theater camp when I was about 3 years old, I think. I started really young. And it was this beautiful thing. It was called Playground Theater. It was this couple that led this. They just brought all these kids, and one of them was a songwriter, one of them was like a playwright. And they would get these kids together. The kids they got to choose whatever character they wanted to play, and then the both of them would write a show around that for the kids with songs in it for them to sing along with as well. And ever since that just kind of left a lasting impression on me in terms of wanting to become an actor, wanting to explore that, feeling a sense of community, using your imagination. It was really a beautiful thing.
I'm more interested in how did you figure out your vocal range of being a tenor?
Honestly, that being a tenor didn't come for me until later in my life. When I went to college, when I started at college, I went in as sort of a classically trained bass/baritone. And I guess over the course of those 5 years I was at NYU, I've kind of discovered different parts of my voice that I didn't know I had access to. And a lot of training, a lot of practice, a lot of playing around, I discovered this high, belty, mixy, falsetto part of my range that I just never cared to explore before. And now it's kind of my meat and potatoes, if you will. I feel most comfortable there at the end of the day now, rather than when I was like 18, 17.
Do you think your voice has evolved since you first started to now?
Yeah, I believe so. Just especially the type of roles I like to go for now. I usually, back in the day, back even in my 20s, early 20s, I was kind of dead set on going for like those golden age, legit, um, kind of, almost opera based roles. But nowadays, I kind of lean towards like the rock vocal type roles, sort of your Jesus Christ
Yes.
Superstars, or your um, Next to Normal, Rock of Ages. So plenty of examples, but those are the only ones that come to mind right now. But yeah, those are the ones I kind of lean toward nowadays. But like, I still like to do my legit stuff as well, because that has a special place in my heart at the end of the day as well. But there's just something more enthralling about feeling yourself during the singing rock music, I guess.
So you're mentioning about Jesus Christ Superstar, I suppose. The the type of song that probably would be hard to do would be the one that Jesus sings called Gethsemane. That's the name of the song. So
Yeah, that that's a song I'm also practicing as well at the
mm,
moment. That is, on the other end of the spectrum, a very daunting song, but for very different reasons. Like dramaturgically, dramatically, that song has a lot of emotional depth to it. on top of having an extreme range, the high falsetto you have to use in it while being on the verge of tears. Yeah, that's a tough one. But that is a song that I hope to one day perform in the show itself. But to me, I think the more difficult vocal part in the show is Judas overall, only because
Mm.
he sits up in this higher beltier mixy range the entire show, and he has to kind of tackle slightly different vocal stylings at different parts depending on how you approach it. I've heard it done very differently, but whether it's more rock, more pop, or a mixture of the two, which I think is the best. If you meet in the middle of both of those for that part. But yeah, Judas would be the dream role, I think, for me, just because I feel like he has the best journey in that show, and he's like the most interestingly written and captivating character to me, or one of the most captivating musical theater, or just, I mean, characters in general. But yeah, that score is incredible, and that would be an honor to be a part of that at some point.
Well, if you know the history of Judas, and in the Bible, he betrayed Jesus and then he killed himself. But I love the rock opera Jesus Christ Superstar with Ted Neely. And a little bit of
Mhm.
fact here, Jarrad. Did you know Ted Neely played Jesus until he was 63 before he retired from the role?
Yeah, I saw him do the role back when I was living in Massachusetts. The tour was coming through town. I think it was
Mm.
coming through UMass. Um, and I got to see him do the role of Jesus, and that was only like 15 years ago or something, maybe more. But
No, it
he, I
had to
mean,
be
he was,
more because he retired when he was 63. He's in his late 70s now, I believe.
yeah, maybe. Oh, it was probably mid 2000s then. It was when I was in high school, I think, and he still was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like what a voice! And even on the high note in Gethsemane was like
The high register, yeah.
spot
That
on.
that
Yeah,
that would be a difficult role to play for you, I think. But you would have to really feel the way Jesus felt in the garden, sweating blood and just I only want to say, like you really have to put your like whole soul into there. Jarrad, I know that you have performed a variety of roles through your musical theater career. Uh, which role is your favorite? Would it be Tony in West Side Story, Tommy in The Who, Tuxie Melvin in Toxic Avenger? Which one do you think would be the your best? Luke and Altar Boys, Rum Tum Tugger, Cats the musical.
that's tough. That's tough. Uh, oh man. So the thing with the Who's Tommy, I adore the Who's Tommy. I adore the album
Hmm.
as a concept album, and then how it translates to stage. I think it works really well for most people. Some people, it's hard to kind of latch on to what the show's saying or what it's going for, which I can understand. It's like highly symbolic, poetic, allegorical in nature, and I feel I've done that show twice now. Once as cousin Kevin, and then the next time as Tommy, or the narrator. I adore that show, and the role of Tommy was probably my favorite that I've done overall. As much as I love West Side Story, as much as I love the role of Tony, Tommy just is a very, very special show that I feel like is very underappreciated. And unfortunately, it had a revival on Broadway recently. It is on Broadway currently, but it just announced its closing recently, and it's only been around for a few months. And that I can understand why, but I feel like it deserves to have a place on Broadway at all times. But that's just me.
Well, what was it about Tommy that you liked? I mean, it says your performance in the role was highly praised. Why was it highly praised?
It's because he goes through this horribly traumatic event as a child, and then just shuts down, becomes the quote unquote deaf, dumb, and blind kid, um, where he's just kind of drifting through life in this catatonic sort of state. But he is still experiencing things that you just can't see or witness physically. That's all kind of like boiling within, until it reaches a point in the show where he finally reawakens through the breaking of the mirror, which is what he experienced the event as a child, where he saw a man murdered through the mirror, in the mirror rather, and then he becomes sort of this like pinball playing rock star and just leaves his family behind because he has so much disdain and anger towards his family and what they did to him, that he just shuns them. But the whole point of the show eventually is that he surrounds himself with these adoring fans, they just leave him like that in an instant, and his family are the only ones that stay behind, and he's able to move on by forgiving them and basically embracing his past lives or his past versions of themselves, and becoming one, and just feeling the love of within for himself and for his family. And it's just a beautiful show. I think it has a beautiful message about forgiveness and self-love that really hit home for me and inspired me.
But you do realize Roger Daltrey played a very, his part is memorable, but you have to play like I think it might be easier to play a deaf character than it is a blind character. How did you manage that blind part of it? Well, how did you practice for it? How did you help yourself become that blind kid?
So there was this fellow actor in the show that who had played the role before, Tommy, and he was playing Uncle Ernie now, who of course, very questionable character. But we had discussions about this, and at the end of the day, it was all about achieving this sort of meditative state where you're kind of just imagining things within, sort of like a euphoric place, like a special nostalgic place in my heart is just what I kind of just kept picturing and picturing to the point where it was kind of like all I could see or picture in front of me, so that everything else just faded away and I just had to trust that everyone else, because they just lead Tommy around the stage until he awakens later on. But it was all about being and just like separating himself from the real life circumstances by picturing this like place that would just calm the mind, because that's just it was his body was just protecting him at the end of the day. And yeah, it was just all about that. As long as I honed into that place in my mind, that memory, that those pictures of places that brought me joy and comfort, that definitely helped.
What was going through your head? This is it. This is the day. This is my first performance.
Um, it was it was a lot of meditation for that part on my own, kind of isolated from others, to help with the catatonic, deaf, dumb, and blind state. There was meditation involved, but then on the flip side of it, when he's doing everything else, like the spirituality of the narrator or being awoken, with being the rock star later on, that was all very collaborative with everyone else. So there was like two very separate sects of approaching this part in terms of like the isolation for the meditative state, and then the collaboration with everyone else to kind of work on all the physicality and the energy of it all, which is very different. But yeah, so it was a bit of two different worlds kind of colliding to kind of create the one character. Even though he's not really, he's more two characters than one. He's the narrator and he's Tommy. So there's like this disconnected soul that then becomes the rock star.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'd be more interested in thinking about like when you performed as Rum Tum Tugger in Cats the musical with the Royal Caribbean. That must have been a pretty challenging role. Like the physical demands, the vocal challenges, the characterization, costume and makeup. Can you give us an idea what it was like for the costume and makeup? Because you had to have this put on you every performance. What was like going through your head? Oh, here I am, making myself look like a cat.
So for Cats the musical, I was personally not a fan of the show until I did it. Kind of changed my whole mind on the show. But anyways, never mind all the preconceived notions I had about Cats before going into it. But yes, the preparation for Cats the musical is intense because it's like a couple hours before you're even performing. You gotta start with the makeup. You gotta put the wig on. You gotta put on the cat suit. Especially on a two-show day, the cat suit's still gonna be a bit damp from the first show. Even if you dry it, it still happens. You all are sweaty messes up there because it's hot. The costume does not help. The wig does not help. The makeup is just. Hopefully, it doesn't fall off, but you might sweat it off, which happened. Um, so that show does take up a big portion of your day than more than any other show probably would. Um, but I after I kind of had a deeper appreciation for the show, it took me a few months of doing it to be like, oh, I get it now. I get this character. I get what we're doing here with community and these Jellicle cats and what the Jellicle ball and what everything that's going on, as weird and kooky and crazy as it is, it all kind of makes sense in a beautiful way. And I'm I'm so lucky I was a part of it, to be part of the Jellicle tribe. And Rum Tum Tugger is now. I know Tommy's my number one, but I'd say he's pretty close to being two or three in my favorite roles I've done. And it's a very dance heavy role, and I'm not like technically the best dancer by any means, but I enjoy dancing. I 110% energy wise. I just put myself into everything I do in terms of movement. So I kind of made it my own, but it's good because Tugger is kind of he does his own thing anyways. So at the end of the day, it kind of works character wise. So at least that justifies that. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. As much as a pain it was to prep for the show, it was really a joy to experience.
Yeah, I can imagine like the vocal challenges. It requires a strong and versatile singing voice, but also it's a complex character because it's a flamboyant and rebellious personality, and you're capturing the essence, which can be challenging. Now, it's I know that the role is physically demanding and it requires you to perform complex dance routines and acrobatics, especially when you're wearing that costume. What made you think that during the performance, like the acrobatics, that maybe some part of your costume isn't going to fall off or something?
So my wig fell off a few times. So that does happen. If you haven't put it on properly, because you do have to change wigs sometimes, which I do at the very beginning of the show. The big opening number happens, and then I have to switch wigs, basically
Mm.
put on some extra makeup, put on the Tugger attire over what I had. And sometimes I just didn't do it enough or do it properly. And by the end of the show, it's barely hanging on. It's hanging on by a thread for dear life, and it's just gonna flop right off, which it did. And but that's okay. You just kind of have to play it off. Like it's just that's part of theater, live theater. At the end of the day, is just things will go awry, things will go wrong. It's just how you make that moment work.
I bet, Jared, that you were so glad that that was over with.
I mean, I kind of miss it. It's been like I guess
Uh,
it's been almost a year now since I've stopped performing cats, but I do kind of miss it as much as the makeup. The makeup for me was the hardest part because it took me like 45 minutes to an hour and then reapplying for a second show and then taking it off. It was not great for the skin either, applying that every show. But I would I go back and do it again? Probably. Yeah.
well, I was watching a documentary. Remember the Planet of the Apes series with Roddy McDowell and Kim Hunter? Remember and the way they look. Well, I was watching a documentary and how they applied that makeup, and it almost took them a whole day to put the ape stuff on it. Nowadays, like the new Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, it's all this kind of electronic stuff they put around your face, and it's digitally enhanced, so you don't have to go through any of that stuff they did in the '60s. So I can imagine sitting there and say, "Okay, we're going to make you look like one of the members of Cats," and I'm like, "Okay," again after 20 times, you know. So I can imagine. But amazing how you can be Tommy in the Who, Hunchback of Notre Dame. You played Clopin. You played in part of the ensemble in South Pacific. But the one thing, Jared, I want to ask you about is Danny Zuko from Greece.
Hmm.
Did you put a little bit of John Travolta spin in it?
Yeah, I think it's hard not to at least inject a little bit of his weird
Yeah.
voice into a role. Maybe, I mean, a bit. I didn't want to do it exactly what his thing was with the character. I kind of wanted to play more into his insecurities and like having these like dual personas and who he's with the guys and who he's with Sandy. This like this thing he puts on, and then but like deep down he has these other feelings that he kind of wants to let out more, but it's just part of the culture, part of the toxic masculinity sort of thing. So I enjoy exploring that a bit more. But yeah, it's fun to play up the like what he does when he's like laughing. He's funny. He's funny. It's a good. I mean, he's great in the part. But um, but yeah, that was fun.
And what was it like working with the female who played Sandy D? What did you like? What was the main thing that you liked working with her? Because you had to do a lot of kissing, and how did that kind of feel that you had to kiss her? How did you put that into being?
Um, yeah. So with roles that require sort of that romantic relationship in them, um, that just it requires a bit more. Um, you have to be a bit more attentive, bit more careful with
Mm.
how you go about that. It's of course it's very collaborative with your scene partner. It's just finding the right comfort zone where everything kind of works. Um, it's finding that chemistry can be a bit hard sometimes, especially if you don't know the person going into a show. I guess it's spending a bit more time with that person outside of rehearsals to just kind of work off each other's vibes, create more of a friendship, more of a relationship that you can then help translate to on stage. So there is always that element to it in terms of just like getting to know someone a bit better, to help your characters work better on stage as well.
Yeah, I can see that. All of these wonderful, wonderful characters like Tommy, Clopin, Melvin, James. You had to prepare for all of these things. Was there ever a time when you accidentally put another character in this, sort of like you did the Danny Zuko, and for a man of importance, instead of Ernie, you put a little bit of Tommy in there? Was there a time when you did that?
Oh, maybe there are there are certain like physical things with characters that I am drawn to. I like to find a very specific ism they have from like a tick, if you will, like a physical tick of some kind. If it's like big or small. And I guess there were times that I might have there was a tick maybe I liked from one character that I would accidentally introduce into another one, and then I would have to kind of like clock myself on that and pull back from that. I think the one that comes to mind, there's when I'm playing certain kind of characters that are a bit more upbeat, bit more energetic, bit more in your face, bit more like intrusive. If you, I guess I'll put it that way. It's a lot of stuff I would do with my tongue. Even if it was like Danny Zuko or Luke and Alter Boys or Rum Tum Tugger, especially Rum Tum Tugger, but that's because he's a cat. But that's a whole other thing. But I think I had to pull back a bit more on my the use of some of the isms with the tongue I had at certain points. I think especially with Zuko or Luke and Alter Boys. But yeah, it's weird sometimes trying to explore or inhabit a character physically, and then you find things that work and don't work. So it is a bit of trial and error. So sometimes other characters will bleed through, but you gotta have to try and separate it as much as you can, unless it's something that you can kind of make work for like a happy medium sort of situation. But yeah, it happens.
Yeah, I can imagine all these characters that you have to learn, and you're probably, if I were to say, can you do a scene from West Side Story right now, you probably could, complete with the entire dialogue. How do you deal with your mental health? Because like you've done it all almost.
Yeah, I think for most performers, stage performers, musical theater performers, at the end of the day, you go through a lot of auditions, and it's you get a lot more no's than you get yeses, and that can be the most taxing part. Is the rejection aspect of performing that you know a lot of us don't really talk about as much. Of course, we like to revel in the fact that we have a job, and we'll talk about that, and then we can kind of sit back for a bit when we're in a job, even though we're still auditioning when we're in a job to get to the next job. It never stops. Even if you get like a 1 year contract, even by like halfway through it, you got to start thinking, oh, I got to start auditioning for the next thing.
Hmm.
Or if there's like some time off you can get on a 1 year contract to go pop to do something quickly and then come back. Um, so with the mental health, it's all about taking care of yourself and not taking the rejection so seriously. That's probably the hardest part. Is like, oh, it's another no. You get to the finals for something, you're like one of two or three people considered for a role, and it's sorry, and then you won't hear from them for like another year if they want you to come back in for a part. Um, but that's just kind of how the industry works. So it's just accepting the rejection, understanding it, and just being able to persevere beyond that.
I can imagine, like when you auditioned for Tony in West Side Story, what like I'm not saying anything against your acting ability or your singing ability, but how come they chose you to play Tony? Was there anybody that might have been a better fit?
Uh, that's a hard question to answer. I guess because I don't know where they're coming from. Uh, I wish I knew more about that. Just like the decisions to cast people at, yeah, I wish I knew the details, but uh, I, I, I don't know. I guess uh, I was. Sometimes all it has to do with is like height. With whoever the cast is, Maria and Tony, it's like whoever matches up physically, or if they try them together in the room, like audition together for like a recall, a callback. Whoever has the best chemistry with one another. It might not necessarily be all about one or the other, but more about how they work together. And it might just be, yeah, an age thing, a certain energy thing, just how they approach things, how they approach the character. But a lot of the time, I mean, it isn't up to you, and like things you can't like change physically or chemistry wise. That kind of determines how you get cast a lot of the time.
Yeah, I've been listening to how you speak, and I'm like, this guy's in the UK, and you haven't picked up the accent yet.
No, no, not yet, not yet. It might happen though.
Well, one of my bosses in my job was Irish. He had a really thick Irish accent, and I remember being on the phone, and I started speaking to the person like in Irish, and I'm like, oh God, the guy's gonna think I'm making fun of him. But it's easy because it's easy to pick up the accent. So I can imagine one day you're gonna wake up, hello there. Oh, you got some coffee? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm hoping that happens. Honestly, yeah, yeah,
It
be
would be kind
nice.
of cool having you
Yeah.
speak English accent. Can you share some memorable experiences from your time at New York University Steinhardt?
Hmm. Yeah, I think one of the coolest parts about going to school, especially for performing in New York, is of course being part of the mainstream Broadway culture. It's like right there at your fingertips. So in terms of like auditioning for things, being seen for things by casting directors, it was so easy, and there were a lot of people in the school that already had kind of like teachers who had connections that could help you along the way as you kind of navigate life in New York. And there's a lot of course, most of the musical theater writers, of course, live in New York, so you got to kind of collaborate with them through like new works or readings that NYU put on. That was probably the coolest part, was being able to work with either these up and coming writers or writers that have kind of been established already with some of their newer work. They're kind of workshopping it by casting students at NYU, which I was a part of a few times. So that was definitely the coolest part about going to Steinhardt.
Yeah, talking about readings, there's one you did here, The Legend of New York. It's a table reading. You played the lead of Lonnie. And also another one was Joey Contrara's future Broadway songbook featured soloist. Can you tell me a little bit about your Elise stage reading, James lead? What was that like?
Um, so that was a new musical that I can't remember. They were from these students from another school had written a musical, so they were fellow students as well.
Mm,
Um, I can't remember if they were from Tisch, maybe it was NYU Tisch, which is the other musical theater performing school at NYU, writing a show, and they cast anyone who auditioned for it at NYU. It wasn't just Steinhardt; it wasn't Steinhardt exclusive. And it was just like we put it on. We did rehearsals for a few days, and it was basically just like a stage concert. Like we had our music in front of us, we had microphones. We just read off of that, and but that's like that's where you start. But that's where any show starts from the ground up. You have to start with
mm,
those stage readings and do multiple of those to then eventually, like, I mean, to get a show to Broadway takes so long,
mm,
unless you're really lucky or have these producers that kind of come already like to you and like let's put it on. But like usually you have to the time it takes to workshop a show, um, is countless hours, years and years of work. I don't envy musical theater writers that have to keep changing things around to then make a show work for a Broadway stage or an off Broadway stage even. But that's like, yeah, so it was just like the first iteration of that show that they just were writing while they were at school. So it's like stuff like that, and during school you're a part of all these little things here and there which kind of help you understand the different processes of an incarnation of a new musical.
So I don't see you writing a musical in the future then, huh?
Probably not for me personally. I could collaborate with someone, but I mean I couldn't do it all myself. No.
Yeah.
It's too stressful.
Now I want to ask you about why you needed two vocal trains, Scott Murphy and Jane Hansen. What did you need both of them for? What is something that Scott taught you that Jane couldn't?
So Jane Hansen was my voice teacher through middle school and high school in Massachusetts. I would have loved to continue working with her, but once I was at NYU, they assign you a voice teacher to work
Mm,
with there. And Scott Murphy was my teacher at NYU. Honestly, each voice teacher approaches things very differently. They all have very different styles to approaching the voice and each person's voice. I miss working with Miss Hanson because that was back when I was really focused on like sort of classical, operatic, legit musical theater material because I didn't really tackle pop rock or musical theater, contemporary musical theater until I got to college. Not as much, maybe a little bit here and there, but mostly the classical stuff. But I think that's a good place to start for singers starting out, is sort of those like arias, Italian arias, to find the base of a technique, which is what she did for me. She kind of established the base of my technique. I was singing before I met her in like choir, but I didn't really understand or process things properly until I met her. And so she kind of established my, especially with like the way I held myself, the way I breathed, the way I kind of focused my voice. And then when I got to college with Scott Murphy, he kind of taught me the resonance of the voice, like in the mask resonance, which then eventually kind of led me to finding the tenor side of my voice through it's like starting kind of nasally, but then it's kind of finding the happy medium of being in that resonance but not being too nasally, which then helps kind of with that high mix, that high belt
mhm.
stuff. Um, so his approach to it kind of helped me find that, whereas Miss Hanson kind of gave me the foundation for my voice to then kind of discover what it could do down the line.
That's very interesting. Can you explain to us in the coaching what is actor therapy? What's that all about?
It was this really cool thing I got to do a few times in New York City. It was led by musical theater writer composer Ryan Scott Oliver and Tony Award winner Lindsay Mendez, who I think is currently in Merrily We Roll Along. She's incredible, but so it's the two of them who are very good friends, and they kind of led these sort of audition workshops with students in college or just out of college to kind of work on your rep in your audition book, or work on material that you're using for an upcoming audition or something like that. And it was a very comfortable, welcoming, warm environment, and everyone was very supportive. And getting to work with them was incredible because they had like wonderful advice about like sort of how to, hold yourself in the room and how to approach material. And it was one of the nicest experiences I've had like outside of school in New York, where I got to meet some cool people along the way as well. And I need to find that kind of in London. I still haven't found that yet here. Something where I can just go and have that environment and work on my stuff in a very comfortable way. I'm still searching for that, but yeah, that was a really nice thing to have while I was in New York.
Yeah, you ever tempted to say like, if it's money you need, I don't have any, but what I do have is special skills. Your special skills: beatboxing, second degree black belt, taekwondo, didgeridoo sound, a cappella experience. Wow. Were you able in your power metal band Quantum Twilight? Were you able to use any of that beatboxing or the didgeridoo sound or a cappella in there?
Uh, no, unfortunately not. But I'm kind of hoping to eventually utilize those on whatever I get to record next. I'm trying to figure out what my plans are in terms of my whatever my next project will be in terms of recorded music. But I definitely want to be able to utilize my beatboxing, vocal percussion, and the strange sounds I can kind of make with my voice. And even I'm even like what I really want to do now in terms of music, besides musical theater performing, I really want to kind of go into more of like a metalcore type music. So sort of like kind of that screaming meets singing,
Really?
melodic metal. Yeah, I've been exploring that a bit more with my voice, finding the screaming technique, which is yeah, a very tough one to approach because you can easily destroy your voice if you don't use the
Wow.
technique with it. But there is a way to do it, and I've been working on it the past year and a half, and I've been finding that I really enjoy doing it, and I really want to be able to kind of my next step into whatever album I do, hopefully at next point in time, I'd rather go down the sort of metalcore melodic metal route rather than power metal again.
Can you tell us what it was like being a member of the Actors Equity Influence? Did it influence your career?
um, Yeah, I think I got my Actors Equity card after I did the Who's Tommy the second time. I think through playing the role of Tommy slash narrator is when I got my card. And having your card is, I mean, everyone who works on Broadway or big regional houses off Broadway, for the most part, you have to be part of Actors Equity. You have to have your
Mm.
card. You are represented by this union, and you need
Mm.
to work on their contracts that are offered for different house. There are different contracts offered for different houses, Broadway houses, regional, so on and so forth. But once you're a part of that union, you're basically they're your go-to people for questions or any issues dealing with the show or anyone in the show.
Mm.
Um, and of course, with the equity minimum in the contract as well. So they're kind of trying to help you along the way that way, and also help you with insurance as well, because you get covered if you work a certain amount of time on shows. And it's nice to be part of the union. It helps. It gives you access to more auditions as well because you get access to their website, which is where a lot of the auditions are posted, and then you can submit yourself for along with your agent. But then there's a lot more you can do independently as well when you're a member.
Yeah, well, good thing you're not part of the SAG and after it because of the strike. You would have been probably, I don't know what your life would have been like, but getting that card, the actors union, that's a totally different thing. It has nothing to do with the SAG and after, right?
Yeah, no, those are two different unions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how, where do you go from here? Like, you're a tenor, you're a vocal performer in all these different shows, like Tommy, Toxie Melvin in Toxic Adventure. Like, can you share us some insights about your role as Jamie in the last 5 years? What did you like about that role?
That so that's only a two-person musical. It's only two people on stage for 90 minutes. So you're basically singing what for half the show for 45, 50 minutes. It's just the show is on your shoulders. There's only one song where, well, I guess two songs where the male and the female character Jamie and Kathy sing together, but otherwise it's just you singing solo, and it's quite quite an emotional journey from begin. It's the last 5 years of their romantic relationship. His story goes forward, and she starts at the end and goes backwards. So I guess I would say her role is harder than Jamie's because as an actor, Jamie's experiencing the story play out at least forward in time, where she has to go start at this horribly dramatic place at the beginning, and then go to the find the euphoria of being at the start of the relationship at the end of the show, and that's so like that's a tough role. Whereas Jamie is just a hard sing and has some moments that are tough as an actor. If I Didn't Believe in You, especially, I feel like was one of the hardest songs I've ever had to do as an actor, and I feel like I didn't do it justice. So I would like to like revisit, especially that song specifically, to kind of like nail the nitty gritty of that. It was a hard show. It's a very hard show, and it's coming back. No, it's coming to Broadway for the first time next
Mm,
year with Nick Jonas as Jamie.
really? Wow, Nick
Yeah,
Jonas.
yeah,
The Jonas Brothers. Wow.
yeah.
So, like, have you? If someone handed you like a script for Merchant of Venice, would that be something, or some Shakespearean play? Would that be something that you would be able to do? Because a lot of the English back then was all like, the quality of mercy is not serene. How would you undertake that Shakespearean script?
So I don't have much Shakespeare experience besides what I've done in school. It was never something I was fully drawn to, unfortunately. As much as I appreciate it, I love seeing Shakespeare. I love like the amount of work and craft that goes into it, especially with like the iambic pentameter and like the very specific way of approaching it, speaking wise, the patterns, the rhythm, like all the hidden meanings because of like all the archaic language, because it's like a whole other beast. Approaching Shakespeare I mean, in a way it is an actor's dream, and another way it's just a very daunting, intimidating task to undertake. So that I've just never been interested in performing it myself, though.
Wow. Yeah, before we continue, I wanted to ask you, how did you meet Nayeli Ablego? Like, how did you end up meeting her?
Um, that's funny because we attended a summer camp at NYU Steinhardt before we both ended up actually going there, being accepted and going
Mm,
through the program. We attended a summer camp there, which was sort of like a preview of what the program would be. I can't remember if it was like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It was just a few weeks in New York, and they put us up in the dorms over the summer.
mm,
And yeah, I quickly became friends with her. I love Naomi. She's just such a versatile singer and artist, and
hmm.
she's also just hilarious and quirky and lovely. But yeah, so she was like the first friend I made at NYU, and then we were just friends throughout the whole time we were there. but yeah, I'm just glad I got to go through that program with her and like just learning from her and her work ethic and technique. And she's one of a kind.
Yeah, when we had her on a program, she actually performed for us, and she's really good.
Yeah.
Great singer. She It was awesome. I'm like, I didn't expect it. She showed up all ready to perform, and I'm like, I'm very honored that you want to perform, so let's do it. So great. And then we posted a little video of you and her singing, and I'm like, who's that guy? So that's Jarrad Biron Green. Oh, so that was amazing, my friend. That was amazing. Now that you're in the UK, did you go there because it just did it affect your career? Did it give you more opportunities? What was the reason?
I so I performed on cruise ships for a few years from like 2017 to last year to
Yeah,
2023. I actually met my wife on my second contract in 2018.
nice.
Uh, and then we did a few contracts together after that. It was kind of a way for us to maintain our relationship by working together with the same company, Celebrity Cruises and then Royal Caribbean.
Hmm.
Um, but so she's originally from Liverpool, so she's British. So
Hmm.
I eventually we just made the decision to get engaged and basically for me to move over here and then get married, which we did 2 years ago now. And
Awesome. That's great.
well, well, we were legally married in 2020, and then we had our ceremony in 2022 because of obviously COVID happened. But that kind of helped speed up the process for me to get my visa to then move along to the UK. So we were in Liverpool. We only moved out of Liverpool in December of last year. So I've been in this flat in London for, I guess, since the end of December. And so I'm trying to navigate a whole new industry here, essentially. I mean, it is still musical theater, but it's whole new casting directors, whole new shows, a very different way to go about things here that I'm still figuring out. But yeah, I got a new agent when I came here who's been helping me very, very much getting more auditions. I've had plenty of auditions so far. I've gotten to finals for a few things, just haven't quite found that role yet to kind of help propel me on here. But I've gotten close a few times already, and yeah, I guess it's just about just committing and persevering and pushing through and just finding my way through the madness that is the London theater scene.
So I take it that if the opportunities were back in New York and other places, states, and you were to perform, would you take her with you and stay for like weeks at a time until the show's over, or would you just say, "Okay, bye, honey," and then leave and leave her alone? How would that work for you? Or you just stick with UK work?
Uh, so at this point in time, I'm trying my best to just find work here so we can kind of just maintain our life here because we're hoping to buy a house at some point soon outside of London to kind of
Mm.
go back and forth for work. That is the goal. And to maybe start a family soon. We're in the midst of like a big life change. I've already had this big life change, like moving here, but now like another one's coming up. So there's like a lot going on. There's a lot of moving pieces. But probably if work did come up like for a really good opportunity in the US, I'd probably just go and she would stay here and then I would come back whenever that was over. But of course, I wouldn't want to be away for too long. It depends what it is. If it's something that will help me in the long run, I'll probably take it, even if it is for several months, a tour of some kind that lasts like more than a year, which tends to be the case nowadays. I would take it only if I thought it would be the right career move to make.
And the money would have to be there too.
Yeah, usually on tours though, the money's pretty good, especially if you tour outside of the UK. Those international tours, those can be very much worth it financially speaking.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, just being on a celebrity cruise ship, what was your idea? Like cruise ships, like you're on there, and
Yeah.
if you're gets a lot of if you get seasick, I don't know how that worked for you because you had to actually literally stay on the ship.
Yeah, it's not a lifestyle that works for everyone. I will say that. I really only felt seasick a few times on my first contract. I wore these like C bands that you put on your wrist to kind of like help with pressure points to kind of help your body maintain equilibrium and not get seasick.
Mental
Um,
health. Yeah.
yeah. So those helped. I only needed them the first contract. Once I got used to it, it was really just the Caribbean, which was those. It can be a bit rocky there when you're going
Wow.
back and forth from different places. But when I was in the Mediterranean on another contract, that was which is I would do that again in a heartbeat. I mean, like found some of my favorite places in the world. I mean, I was lucky enough to travel and perform at the same time and save up money. So that 6 years being on ships,
Amazing.
uh, it was worth it. Yeah, and I met my wife, so like at the end of the day, it was perfect. It worked out. But yeah, it's just it can be kind of taxing though at times since you're on a ship for upwards to 8 months to a year. Sometimes the contracts can be that long. Um, it's all about maintaining a healthy regime. Finding something in the day, even if you're stuck on the ship the whole day, it can be a sea day where you can't even leave the ship because you're going from one place to the next and it's a bit too far away, or just because of how the itinerary works. It's about finding that routine and those little things that bring you joy throughout the day and not being stuck in your cabin all day, isolating yourself too much. Yeah, it's strange. It's very weird.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
imagine. And being on the sea and keeping equilibrium, not getting sick. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, if you ever were sick with all these, like being Tommy and Frank Abagnale Jr., if you're ever ill or if you ever like, who would be your understudy? Who's your understudy? Who's the one that would take over for you?
So for cruise ships, it would work a bit differently, but uh, for like a national tour, for something like West Side Story that I did, there's since it's such a long term contract, some of those shows that only last for like a week or two at like a regional theater, 1 to 3 weeks, there wouldn't really be any understudies or covers or swings because they would just hope that they wouldn't need one because the show run was on the shorter side. But for something like a tour that lasts months on end, for West Side, there were covers who were people like in the show, like in the ensemble or in like the dance tracks that would cover kind of the leads or the supporting roles in case there was injury or sickness. Of course, I experienced plenty of sickness while on tour because naturally that's going to happen at the end of the day. You're moving from location to location so quickly, changing environments with every hotel that you go into and stay in. So eventually, you're not going to feel great working with that schedule and changing around, things around so much. So yeah, it happens. It happens a lot, especially on tour. I feel like
Hmm.
shows the swings who cover literally several parts in the show, and you could go on at like a moment's notice mid show. Hopefully, it's like a few hours before the show, you know. But sometimes, if someone gets injured in the middle of the show, they have to go on next scene or figure something out. I have to commend the swings of musical theater for any show that they're in because they have one of the hardest jobs.
I agree, but you can't, like, when you became Danny Zuko, you can't be sure that you were going to be Danny Zuko throughout the whole show. Who would replace you if something happened? Who would be the next Danny Zuko to replace you for that bit? Was there?
Um, for for that particular contract, we there was one cast doing 5 different shows at once in rep,
Mm.
and as far as far as I can remember, I don't think we had understudies or covers because we were already doing 5 shows at once. And if we were all learned multiple parts for 5 shows, that I just don't. It wouldn't have worked out. But yeah, no, people just did the part to the best of their ability. They tried not to cancel, but if there aren't any covers or swings or understudies, you just kind of have to. Unless you literally cannot, you would just
Wow.
have to do your best.
So I want to go back to about your band now. Most of your band members are from UK as well?
Uh, no, it's actually me and Gregory Russell, who's from Virginia. He was actually the one who started it all. He's the founder of
Mm,
the band, and I was really more of just a vocalist to kind of fill in. He did all everything else himself because he's just incredible, a multi instrumentalist. Uh, Writer, composer, and
wow.
he did everything, and I helped basically finish when he we needed a vocalist and someone to kind of like fine tune the end of the album. And that's kind of where I come in over COVID because we only met online in like 2020 and worked on a few songs there. And it was just kind of like a COVID project, which then finally came to fruition with the
Hmm.
albums released almost 2 years ago now. But it was definitely one of the most fascinating and fun things I've got to work on in my career because not what I was expecting to do at the end of the day. I was just like, I saw it online and I just decided to, you know what? I've always loved metal, power metal. I've loved those kind of singers. I've been inspired by those kind of singers, that kind of music. I was just like, take a chance. And yeah, we got to work together to just finish the album, record the vocals, and yeah.
Wow, Quantum Twilight. That's a really good name for a band. With Quantum Twilight, I wouldn't have imagined it being a metal band, but hey, power metal. It's power metal, death metal, either way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what's your next show that you're going to be playing or were offered and main character? What would that be?
Oh, what would I hope it would
Yeah,
be?
yeah.
um, So, because I'm still in the midst of auditioning for things at the moment, I do not have that next job lined up at this
Wow.
moment in time. But that's just how it works sometimes. I just did an international tour of Dirty Dancing in concert, which was very enjoyable, um, and I got to visit so many cool cities that I hadn't seen before. And of course, after
Nice.
that tour is over, back reality's set back in. I'm just back in London auditioning, trying to find the next thing. That's just kind of how it works. But ideally, the the role I really see myself fitting into here in London at the moment, there's a musical version of Back to the Future,
Oh, wow. Yes.
and I feel like I could be the Crispin Glover part, George McFly, the dad, 100%. I know it in my bones. I that role at some point I'm gonna play that role.
Oh, yeah. Like you do impersonation. Can you do George McFly? Do you know how to? Can you do like an impersonation George McFly?
I'm in the midst of working on that because he has a
That's
very particular
awesome.
breathy quality and his
I love.
physicalities. He's very kind of gangly and very
I love it.
awkward. But yeah, it's something I'm working on. It's something I think I can really nail if given
That's
the
awesome.
opportunity. But that's kind of probably at the top of my list what I see for roles in London at the moment.
If you were to wake up in the morning and you became one of those characters you played in all these musicals, which one would it be?
Ooh. Uh, well, I think a funny one, an interesting choice would be Toxie in the Toxic Avenger, because I guess technically he is sort of a superhero type character. He's
Nice.
a monstrosity, uh, but he does have enhanced abilities, super strength and whatnot. But yeah, I mean maybe that one, but or oh gosh, that's a toughie. Because saying Rum Tum Tugger would be weird because it would just be a cat. Uh, because he's a Maine Coon cat. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would have to be Toxie probably. It'd
That's
be a good change
amazing.
of pace.
Everyone
Yeah.
wants to be a superhero. And mostly you say, "What would you like to say?" I want. If you were a superhero, what would be your power, superpower? You say, "Well, invisibility would be one of them." That would be, you could walk into a bank, take the money, walk out without people knowing any better.
Yeah.
Not that I'm saying you
Yeah.
should do that, but
No. 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 No.
what are some of the actors or singers that inspire you?
Ooh, okay. uh, there's this. I'm trying to get more into improvisational comedy.
Oh, wow.
Uh, so at the
Comedy.
moment,
Isn't that
yeah,
a stretch for you?
I'm sorry.
Isn't that a stretch for you, comedy?
Uh, Maybe, but I think it's something that because I see myself down the line being more of a like a character type actor, um,
Mm.
kind of the weird, zany parts, the peculiar ones. That's kind of where I see my career heading, and I feel like that's okay by me because I enjoy those kind of parts that I've played before that kind of fit into that mold. But I'm really inspired by a lot of actors or writers, especially on TV, who work a lot in that improv world. There's this one show in particular, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, that I love it. A lot of the actors on there, I mean, there's so much improv that goes into that show. Of course, Danny DeVito is iconic, but the two people that I love on that show that are really inspiring to me are Charlie Day and Glenn Howerton. The two of them are incredible. Charlie Day also is like a singer, and whenever he sings on the show, it's always incredible. He like improvs or writes these songs for the show and he has a crazy range, and he just comes out of this little guy, and he's just like belting to the rafters. He's got this great like gritty rock quality to his voice, which I love. But then there's Glenn Howerton, who I feel like is one of my favorite actors working today, and he
Wow.
hasn't had like that big movie Hollywood break yet, but I feel like if anyone deserves it, it is Glenn Howerton because he comes from a Shakespearean background
Mm.
and his like line delivery in the show is unmatched. And he has this dramatic intensity that works for being this like egotistical, narcissistic, like almost psychopathic person who is just hilarious. He's one of the best characters on TV right now for me, and he needs his career to explode because he deserves it. But he's so inspiring.
Is he one that you would like to tag along if he had to go on a tour and he asked you to come with him? Would you do that?
100%. I feel like there's so much I could learn from him because he's done so many different things. I mean, the fact that he's mastered like improv comedy and he comes from that Shakespearean background and that he's on the cusp, on the verge of having his huge big break, which I know it's coming because no one deserves it more than him. But I would absolutely love to just sit down and talk with him, especially do a tour with him. Like that would be incredible.
That'd be awesome, man.
Yeah.
Here's a clincher question for you, and a final question before we end this interview.
Okay.
The whole audience is completely filled with up and coming singer songwriters, actors, musical performers, anything having to do with entertainment. Then they call you on the stage and says, "Here's Jarrad Biron Green. He's going to give you a word of advice to everyone." What would that be?
Okay. I see. All right. One word of advice. Well, I guess I would have to say something along the lines of just if anything goes wrong, I mean, you will make mistakes. Things will happen, auditions will come up, you'll write something, you'll perform something, whatever it may be. It won't be perfect. You'll make mistakes. Maybe you won't be recognized. You won't be invited back to something. You won't be offered the role or offered the contract, whatever it may be. It does come back to what I was saying about rejection before, but it's it's all about it's all about finding something outside of your career that brings you joy, that gives you that feeling of self-love, of self-acceptance, even after all the rejection, all the no's. You are more than your career, and you're allowed to step away from it and recognize like who you are without being whatever you are within the performing career, and you're allowed to exist separate from that, and you don't have to take it so seriously. Yes, you should work hard. Yes, you should invest time and energy into as much as you can, but it shouldn't be the be all end all. It shouldn't be your entire personality based off of just, your career, because at the end of the day, you know, that's not all you are.
That's true. And then you get a lot of hand ups. Like, yeah, can I be on a cruise ship? I want to meet a girl too. No. Well, thank you, Jarrad. Really appreciate you joining us on the podcast. Thank you for the interview opportunity. We're going to end the stream. Really appreciative. And
Thank you so much.
looking so forward to what your future plans, what you're going to be, who you're going to be. Gethsemane, I like to see you as Jesus Christ himself. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you need the
Oh,
beard.
who knows? Yeah, yeah, I'm missing the beard. Yeah, it's crucial.
Yeah. Okay, everyone. Jarrad Byron Green. Thank you.
Thank you so much.